Okay, so a couple of things regarding this assignment, your first finale assignment. The first thing is expect this to take a little while. It it is if you're taking several hours to complete this assignment and you're wondering why, that's partly because maybe you still have to work out your flow, but it's also that it just takes time. It really just does take time to do these kinds of things, and but I think hopefully it'll be a good investment of time because you'll learn how to do this well. Okay, so I have a default kind of document, except this one has is in Rand staff. Now I need to have um, a G major key signature as well as a 2/4 time signature, and I also have a pickup measure. Now I didn't do any of those things to start off with. The best way to do it would just be to do this right at the very beginning, but um, I thought I would show you how to create pickup measures and after the fact, in case you ever want to do that or need to do that for some reason. Let's say you have a document that's almost fully created, then you say, "Oh, I forgot to do the pickup measure. What do I do now?" Well, here's how. Well, even before we get into that, let's do change the key signature here, G major, and then we'll change the time signature to 2/4. Just number of beats. So you see what I'm doing. Here we go. Okay, so first of all, what is a pickup measure? Well, a pickup measure is a measure it's notated in 2/4, and the reason this is confusing for finale is that finale sees 2/4 and expects 2 quarter notes worth of music, and then suddenly you'll only give it one. And if you do that, what you'll find is that it'll just continue to add notes for you, so it won't work. So if you do try to do this, say rest, and just say D, D, A sharp, right, and then let it go, now you have an empty note right here, and you say, well, I don't want that. So I say, well, what if I put the rest at the beginning? Well, you could do that, but then now you have an empty rest at the beginning that doesn't need to be there either. So what you really need to do is you need to tell finale you want this measure to be a 1/4 measure, which is how many notes, what kind of note value you actually need. But you also need to tell finale, look, it's only, I want to have a 1/4 measure here, but I want it to say 2/4. So in other words, it's still a 1/4 measure. It just looks like it isn't. So what you do is you go to the time signature tool, you double click on that measure, and you actually say 1. And then under more options, you say, well, first of all, make sure that you're only doing that for the first measure. So you say measure 1, 2, measure 1. Otherwise, it'll do it for all the different measures. So then you say use a different time signature for display, and by default it'll have the time signature of the piece, so it'll kind of know what you're trying to do. And then now, as you can see, finale is doing that weird thing that it does when you put too many notes in there, which is exactly what happened. So now if I do this, it'll say there's too many notes. What do I do? Delete it. There you go. There's my pickup measure. Okay, now let's talk about this measure right here. So let's take a look at it. We see that we have different layers happening here. It's a little trickier than it looks actually, because you have an eighth note, then you have, let's consider the notes with the stem up. We have the top layer is G, B, D. So let's start off by creating that layer. So we'll go here. You enter the notes however you prefer. Eighth rest. Oh, another way to, when I enter rest, to do it quickly in the speedy entry, I just enter a note, and then I just enter the note value, and the note will be whichever note that corresponds to a cursor. So let's say I do this, it'll enter a D, but what I really want is at rest, so I just press R, and then it'll turn it into rest. Okay, then I have G, B, D. And you could just say, well, this is really what's happening. I'm just going to leave it like this. Well, but that's not really what this is. And part of the assignment is for you to try to figure out things like this in finale. And this is usually what's going to take the most time, is those kinds of little annoying notational things that are very easy to do on paper by hand, but kind of a pain to do in finale. Okay, so the first thing we might want to do is move that stem the opposite direction. So we'll just go over it, with the speedy entry tool, press L, and now it moves up. Then we now have to switch to another layer, because if I try to add another note here that is an eighth note, this won't work. So I'll switch over. Let me do this so you can see my layers. Here we go. I'll switch over to layer number 2, and I'll go to my speedy entry, and I'll enter another eighth rest, because remember, each layer has its own independent set of values. Then I'll enter a G, eighth note, and then I'll go ahead and enter another G. That is I'll tie this, create T for tie, and then quarter note G. So now we're getting a little bit closer to this, okay? So we have, the rest. We'll take care of this extra rest in a second. And we have a G, right? 1/8 note G on the lower layer, and then G, B, D. The only thing we're missing now is this little single B with the stem down. Now the problem with that is it won't fit in either one of those layers, because this you can't really split it in two, and this one is already full. So we'll actually need to create a third layer, and it'll have to be like a little ghost note. So to see how that works, so let's go ahead and first get rid of this note. So what you can do in Finale is you can always choose to hide a note. In the speedy entry tool, if you press O while you go on either above a note, but in this case I'm only affecting this layer, so I just press O, and now that eighth note will disappear. Now this one is not exactly where I want it to be, so to move that down I have to double click it, and now this will enter my note entry tool, and then I can just move it down with my arrows to the default place, which is this. Okay. Now going back to our next layer, I go to layer 3. Sorry, you can't see, but there I went down to layer 3 down there. And now what I need to do is I have to have a ghost eighth note. I'll just go ahead and make it a ghost right away. A ghost 16th note, and I'll make that a ghost as well. Then a B eighth note, a B 16th note. I'll press L to do it, move it upside down. And then I also need a ghost quarter note there. And then the only thing I'm missing now is to add a B above this G. So making sure that I am on layer 2, which is the red layer, I double click on that note and I press 3. Let's see how much closer we're getting. So we have G, B, D. The only thing we need to do now is add a tie. See what happens if we tie this. We have to make sure we are in. Okay, cool. So that worked. Now, just to get a little picky here, this tie, everything looks pretty good, pretty close, except for the fact that this tie is upside down. You can actually change that easily by going to the special tools, go into the tie option here, and when you click on that, if it doesn't activate, it's because you're not on the right layer. And then if you click in the middle on the little handle here, it's actually not the middle, it's one of the two middle handles. You press Command F and it'll flip that upside down. Now you might be thinking now, well, that's going to be a lot of work to do all this. But the truth is, this happens a couple of times and it's always the same pattern. So all you really need to do after this is just copy the measure and paste it, and then just move the notes and just change the pitches. Okay. And so, one quick way to move things, if it's exactly the same thing, like for example, the measure following this is exactly the same thing an octave higher. So instead of having to go there and individually move the notes, because it can mess things up a little bit, you can just right click a measure, select it, right click it, and do transpose. And you can just transpose up chromatically or diatonically. In this case, we just go up diatonically an octave. There you go. A lot easier, huh? Okay, so you have instructions for your assignment and you should be good to go.